were wiped out.
Cơ sở là ở trong thành thị, ở nông thôn mất hết.
The inability to glean even the smallest bit of information blocked American intelligence agencies from understanding and exploiting these communist political rivalries. Unable to discern North Vietnamese political factions and intentions, American policymakers had to react to Hanoi's moves rather than anticipate them. The Special Forces and later the Navy SEALs realized no victory in South Vietnam was possible without protecting the South Vietnamese civilian population. The primary mission of the Green Berets was to organize armed militias among the 31 Montagnard tribes in South Vietnam. They were tasked to protect the Laotian and Cambodian border areas from NVA infiltration.
Vietnam is not a homogeneous ethnic group. There are people there who've been living on that land before the Vietnamese arrived from the north. Montagnards who lived in the mountain areas, they hated the Vietnamese more than anything else. The CIA and Army intelligence were able to train and arm these people and use this hatred for the Vietnamese for their own advantage.
Numbering between 3 and 12 men, small groups of Green Berets, called A-teams, were responsible for leading, feeding, and equipping hundreds of mercenary soldiers.
Special Forces were more like anthropologists with guns and medicine bags in relation to the Montagnard tribal people. We found them to be extremely loyal. We trusted them and became blood brothers in their ceremonies and drank their ceremonial wines and found them to be very concerned fighters.
These indigenous forces were called Civilian Irregular Defense Groups. At their peak strength, the American 5th Special Forces Group controlled 84 camps with more than 42,000 members.
When I first went in there, we probably had maybe 300 Americans working in the Central Highlands. We had 25,000 troops. Your basic Montagnard private was drawing $21 a month, roughly. So you got a lot of bang for your buck.
The job of the Green Berets required more than basic combat training.
Our job was divided into different categories. The medics trying to teach medicine to their counterparts, and the weapons people trying to take platoons of indigenous soldiers, many of them Montagnard tribal people who had worn loincloths and had crossbows and poison arrows, and give them World War II carbines and submachine guns, and teach them to use the more modern weapons against the Viet Cong.
Corruption among the indigenous forces was an accepted way of life. Stealing, bribery, lying, killing their rivals was a common practice around the camps. Many times it was as dangerous inside the A-team camps as outside.
In one case, Kuang, one of my point men on the team, has a run-in with some guy who he thought was with his girlfriend, goes into the mess hall, and the guy sitting there is eating, and Kuang hits him in the head with the claw part of a hammer and kills him. These people are thugs, basically. These people, you know, that's how they deal with things.
The Green Berets who led the indigenous units suspected that up to 15% of their troops were Viet Cong infiltrators. Everyone else, from the Montagnard tribesmen to the Cambodian and Thai mercenaries to the Chinese Nungs, fought for money. Some American advisors feared that their troops would prove unreliable in a firefight and made plans for their own survival.
On my team, between myself and the American assistant team leader, we had a code word that if I said the code word thunderclap, that we would count in our heads to 6 and then kill all of the indig on the team. I never had to do that, thank God, but we had that plan in place because you could never trust them completely, and you didn't know. They might turn on you out there for whatever reason, and you would have to kill them.
The Special Forces had no career incentives to operate this way, but given the circumstances, they often had no other option. Knowing the truth did not set them free, but it helped keep them alive. The most effective and the most controversial Allied special operation of the war was the CIA's Phoenix program, begun in 1968. It was a combined American-Vietnamese intelligence effort designed to disrupt the civil infrastructure of the Viet Cong. Tax collectors and high-ranking political officials were the intended targets.
A North Vietnamese soldier coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail is as much a stranger in a strange land in South Vietnam as the Americans are. Without the Viet Cong infrastructure, and the Viet Cong had a hard time operating.
Phoenix was known in Vietnamese as Phuong Hoang. Its goal was to force Viet Cong members to either surrender or risk being killed. The immediate effects on the VC were dramatic and successful.
They would try to influence the wife of a guerrilla by giving her money or by sentimental inducement. And then one of them would marry her and divide husband and wife, and through her they might discover our secret locations and set out to destroy us. That's why I said the Phuong Hoang campaign was very dangerous and dreadful. It awoke the full concern of our superiors as to how to deal with the problem. They ordered a counter-campaign. The instructions were to first reorganize our contacts, and then we had to identify who their agents were and educate them.
The Viet Cong feared being infiltrated more than being attacked by American helicopters. As the Phoenix program began to uproot their organizations, infiltration of their ranks and defections created tremendous difficulties for the VC leadership. For the first time, Viet Cong and North Vietnamese army units faced a problem they could not handle.
I would say there were many cases of traitors. The Saigon regime used money to entice our men. If we knew any of our men had been bought, we would apply a variety of measures to deal with them. First of all, if we could not contact them personally, we would use leaflets to give them strong warnings. Or we would suddenly break into the village to capture and bring them out to suppress them, or to educate and advise them not to follow the road of a traitor. We would try and try again to do that for 3 or 4 times before we were forced to eliminate them.
The Viet Cong had used terror routinely to punish suspected enemies and to send a message to all who might resist their demands. The Special Forces had witnessed these atrocities since their arrival in Vietnam in 1958.
As for accusations that our soldiers exercise brutality against our own people, there is a need for distinction. In wartime, brutality is sometimes unavoidable. Our army is the people's army. They love people and serve their cause, but because they are also trained for social class struggle ideology. Therefore, murdering South Vietnam officers and people in villages and cities takes place. It is unavoidable during wartime.
Đây không phải là chỉ có bắt buộc mà gần như là có một cái tinh thần tự giác nhận cái sự lãnh đạo.
Many North Vietnamese and Viet Cong soldiers had grown tired of the war. Less than 9,000 VC and NVA soldiers called Chu Hois had surrendered to the Allied side in 1967. That figure climbed to over 20,000 in 1968 with the initiation of the Phoenix program.
Well, as the war went on and on, casualty had some effect on the soldiers, and they just couldn't face with it anymore. Now, one of the soldiers in my unit, for example, he was very brave, a brilliant soldier. He was really very good. But after one battle, and he saw human meat and intestine hanging around, and he just couldn't cope with it. He just couldn't eat. He just couldn't sleep. And in the end, he gave up. It was too much for him.
The CIA had created a new armed force called the Provincial Reconnaissance Units, or PRU. It was designed to be the action arm of Phoenix. The PRU was equipped and paid for by the CIA. Organized, trained, and led by Green Berets and Navy SEALs designated as civilian advisors, PRU mercenary troops were recruited from the local areas.
Now, in my group, and they call them Provincial Reconnaissance Units, I'm telling you what they were. They were killers for money. Okay? Forget politically correct. Change it to any name you want. These guys fought for money.
When these guys worked for Phoenix, they'd be given a list of purported Viet Cong infrastructure, and during the month they would try and go around the province and kill all these people. My belief is that the PRU program and the Phoenix program was an attempt to duplicate the way the Viet Cong operated.
The Viet Cong response to this attrition among their troops was to increase their use of terror to intimidate members of the PRU and to prevent their own troops from surrendering.
Có những hành động tàn ác, có thể là những hành động mà theo cái
Now, if this is necessary for us to be cruel, as demanded from the higher level of command, in order to eliminate people affiliated with the enemy, I would say it is something we do in order to win the war.
mặt khác nữa,
I would never let my soldiers do bad things or make people